All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the Braves podcast, an impromptu episode. I'm Harrison Smajovits. It's 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. And just last night, I discussed starting pitching for the Atlanta Braves. Using the focus of Justin Verlander, I talked about how you never know what could possibly happen during an offseason. Well, you certainly do not know how unpredictable it is until you have rumors come up immediately. The Braves, two starting pitchers are reported to be on their radar. According to John Heyman, when on MLB Network, he named Lucas Giolito and Chris Bassett as two pitchers, starting pitchers, may I add, with previous All-Star experience that are on the Braves' radar. Now, Bassett's a guy who's come up as like a speculative candidate for most of the season when discussing who are some options out there for the Braves? I've named Bassett. Others have named Bassett. Giolito, not as much. And honestly, at first when I saw that Giolito came up at all, my first thought was, really? With the way he had been performing the last few years? And then I took a second to actually go and check the numbers from the last season. Granted, it's been a long off season. Sometimes you got to go refresh your memory. He played a full season for the Boston Red Sox in 2025. He missed the 2024 season due to a UCL injury. He had a brace put in a few weeks before Spencer Strider would have the same procedure, a couple starts into the 2024 season. Turns out the 31-year-old had himself a solid season, and I can see why the Braves are interested in Giolito. A 3.41 ERA, a 1.29 WHIP, not ideal, but I'll get into the numbers a little bit more in a moment. A 1.20 ERA plus, respectable, and 121 strikeouts and 145 innings pitched. It's his lowest ERA since 2020, and his first sub-4 ERA since 2021. It was just slightly higher, so I had to word it differently. At 31 years old, Giolito is potentially someone that the Braves could ink for maybe a couple of years. And I just want to make sure this is also clarified. When Heyman mentioned the names, it was simply, the Braves are a team that is interested in these arms. He didn't go into any specific details. It's just who is interested, who is not, what's the status on these free agents. Let's move on. But we can talk about some of these guys and build some more context around why they might be interested based on stats, need, etc. At 31 years old, Giolito is definitely someone who could potentially be someone who signs for, let's say, 2 years. His last deal with the Red Sox was for 2 years as well. Maybe throw in a club option at the end of it. Maybe do 1 year, one club option. Who knows? That sounds like a very reasonable number. According to Spotrac, his market value is about $20 million. Might seem a little bit high, but also these days, keep in mind, values just keep going up. He did have a good year. Maybe he gets something close to that. Bassett is a bit of a different story. He comes in at 37 years old. He'll be 37 years old on opening day. And he would probably be someone who's more of a, let's say, a 1-year contract kind of guy. You never know. He's the same age that Charlie Morton was when he got signed by the Braves at 37 years old. Well, re-signed because Morton originally pitched for the Braves in 2008. But I digress. Very similar numbers. You could still definitely call Bassett a Morton type. Last season, 32 games, 31 of which were starts, 3.96 ERA, a 1.32 WHIP, a 1.08 ERA plus, and 166 strikeouts and 170 and 1/3 innings pitched. In case you're wondering, that is a 8.77 strikeouts per 9. If you want to compare that to Charlie Morton during his years, he was with Atlanta. 3.87 ERA, 1.25 WHIP, 110 ERA plus, and a 10.11 Ks per 9. They're comparable, especially when it comes to the durability. Bassett is someone who has made at least 30 starts the last 4 seasons. That is music to the Braves' ears when they're looking for someone who's reliable. Speaking of Charlie Morton, it's very obvious that that this most recent season, they were missing his innings a little bit. Someone who you could guarantee would be available to pitch once every 5 days. That's just the reality. The pitcher who made the most starts last season was Bryce Elder. That just by pointing that out, that already sounds the alarm for how things were going with the Braves. I believe second was Chris Sale with 21 starts. It was an issue. So now you come in and you have to say, all right, how do we get some more innings in here? Sure, a guy like Bassett's a little older, but he is someone who would definitely fit the mold of someone who would get you those innings. 170 last year. As recently as 2 seasons ago, he was pushing to 200. Even Giolito, I know he missed the 2024 season, but last year he clocked 145 innings. He got 26 starts. And before the injury, he was also still a more reliable arm. He had made 30 starts plenty, even when he was struggling. He was someone that, at the very least, was what you would call an innings eater. Now, look, the Braves are not looking for an innings eater. They're looking for a workhorse. In the quote, foolish baseball, that is a different thing. One is quality innings, and one is, well, somebody's got to pitch. And with the way they were pitching the last season, he is definitely someone who could fit the mold of still as potentially a workhorse. For sure, Bassett still fits that mold. Now, I guess the big question we could still discuss here is how would this work, let's say, for the postseason? The reason I think it makes sense to ask is because Bassett was mainly a reliever on the Blue Jays' run to the World Series last season in 2025. He had made his 31 starts, the 32 appearances, but once you get to the playoffs, he had 1 start in 8 appearances. Now, granted, he did pitch well out of the bullpen. But if you're the Braves, if you're signing someone on, you're probably going to want to have him be someone who can pitch playoff games. And I mentioned that last night, as well as discussing other potential options. I did mention Bassett because he's just been a common name. His market value, according to Spotrac, is $15.6 million. I can definitely see the Braves making that kind of move, but even when you make that kind of transaction and put ink to paper and sign him, you definitely want him to be someone who can pitch in postseason games. Yes, even after last season, the Braves went 76-86. Their goal is to get into the postseason. They made upgrades this year. They want to add starting pitching depth. And even if the starting rotation technically has its options, if you look at who could potentially be a starting pitcher this year for the Braves and you list all of them, you will have more than 5 names, which is a good thing, by the way. You will need more than 5 names throughout an entire season. Last year was a bit extreme. The Braves needed at least 19 arms to start at least 1 game. I can't imagine it will get to that extreme again, but 10 or 11, that could be reasonable. And any arm you add to that equation only helps you bridge the gap. It makes it easier to not have to scramble, go get an Eric Fetty or a Carlos Carrasco or whomever could potentially be coming in at any time due to an injury. But Giolito, he also has playoff experience. He is someone who, if we're to be signed by the Braves, could come in and pitch in the postseason. He's made a couple of starts with the White Sox. That was back when they were doing their playoff runs earlier this decade. Nothing recent, but still someone who can get it done. We'll have to see how things materialize. Again, like I said last night, you never know what could happen. Another name could still emerge. I'm not going to name anyone because I don't have any sources to say who it could be. We know right now these guys are interested, or we know right now, my apologies, that the Braves are interested in these 2 veteran arms. This could be, for all we know, the only time we hear of this. And again, you do not know what might happen until you finally have a team come out, make an announcement, and say, hey guys, guess what we did? So we'll have to wait and see what happens. These are 2 targets that definitely make sense. And before I move on to the next topic, neither of these guys have a qualifying offer attached to them, which means compared to, let's say, Zach Gallen or Framber Valdez or Michael King when he was available, these are guys who, if you sign them, you have to give up one of your first round picks. For the Braves case, it would be that the first round pick that they got from Drake Baldwin winning Rookie of the Year, which is the 26th overall pick in the draft, would go to the team that is losing the free agent who had received a qualifying offer. So this is two examples of potentially reliable arms in which the Braves could sign them and then not have to worry about it. The Braves had shown their willingness to give up a draft pick for the qualifying offer, but it seems like they're starting to lean towards some arms where maybe they don't have to. They recently were in on Freddie Peralta in a trade. That didn't happen. You start to wonder if they're going to make the move at all, but based on some of the rumblings, maybe they're not exactly done just yet. We will have to wait and see. All right, moving on. Based on an article from MLB.com's Mark Bowman, the Braves are hopeful that Sean Murphy and Ha-Seong Kim will be back by May, the month of May. It was vague. That's about where the report was left. But we can dissect it a little bit further. We know Murphy is recovering from hip surgery. Kim is now recovering from surgery on his right middle finger. They will still, based on this report, be back sooner rather than later. And yes, it's still at minimum a month for Murphy. Kim, based on his timeline, would probably be back. He could be back in May, but it would likely be mid-May to late May. The early end, based on when he got surgery, which was on January 18th, that puts it around May 18th. And that assumes everything goes right. And things can go right, and you still need a couple extra weeks, and that can end up just putting you in June. And June's the month that we have been discussing the entire time. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was still the case. But it's out there that the Braves are optimistic, and why not? Murphy, of course, he could be back as early as the beginning of May. Once he gets back, they can start platooning him and Drake Baldwin as a designated hitter and the catcher. I know if you look at the overall numbers, you might not be as impressed with how Murphy looked. But at the same time, before the hip started to be an issue, he had his OPS well above 840. He had 16 home runs. He might have been on pace for 25 or 30 if he had been healthy and had the playing time and didn't have to worry about what to do with him and Drake Baldwin like they did last year. He actually looked good when he was healthy. And I think when he comes back and the hip is healed, he can still be a key contributor on the Braves team. As for Kim, yeah, when he gets back, he's the starting shortstop. That's what he was signed to do. That's what he did when he was picked up on waivers last year. Who's going to fill in for him for now? It's Mauricio Dubon. That was who was supposed to be the plan B opening day starting shortstop before Kim had actually resigned. You just default back to that plan B. Jorge Mateo will probably see some action in the infield. They signed him to a one-year deal for depth. Nacho Alvarez is around. Other options could emerge at any time, but that's how it looks at this time. All right, moving on. What impacts the Braves? What actually impacts really every team in Major League Baseball? From last night, Fansided's Robert Murray reported that MLB has told all 30 clubs the trade deadline will be August 3rd at 6 p.m. Now, for those who've been following baseball for a long time, that is a little bit late in the calendar year. Traditionally, it's July 31st at 4 p.m. It's been 6 p.m. over the last few years. That's become more of a common time of day in which they're doing it. But MLB in the last CBA, which was decided after the lockout in 2022, allowed them to move the deadline a little bit, fluctuate it. It can be July 28th, as early as July 28th. It can be as late as August 3rd. That's what the CBA allows. Last year, it was on the traditional date of July 31st, and it was at 6 p.m., the deadline. What is nice for the Braves is that they don't have a home game they don't have a game at all that day. I misspoke. It's a day off in the middle of a homestand. They'll host the Nationals over the weekend, and then they'll have the Marlins come in the day after. It's honestly very nice that they do not have to worry about a game the day of the established trade deadline. As a matter of fact, half the league doesn't. There's 8 games the day of August 3rd. And the benefit of that is you just have to worry less during the deadline about what happens with your team. We see it a lot of years. And this year, actually, all games are still after the 6 p.m. deadline. So no games are mid deadline. There's none before 6 p.m. that I actually have to be worried about. And it's very ideal because we all know in previous years, you have it where players are shaking hands, leaving teams mid game. There was a situation last year where someone just changed dugouts because the trade happened mid game. I know that can happen before the deadline as well, but that's something that happens a lot on deadline day because sometimes there are day games that happen before the deadline or going into the deadline. If you do not have a game at all that day, which is the Braves, you have time to do whatever transaction you want and then fully get ready for the game the next day. I'm just going to use an example here just to help paint a better picture. Let's just say, for example's sake, because he's been talked about as a potential trade candidate already this offseason, they trade Sean Murphy. I don't know if for whatever reason it is, trade for help elsewhere. It's a sell. You get the points. They don't have to worry about if you're in mid-game. Oh, Drake Baldwin's the DH. What do we do? Do we have to forfeit the DH and then worry what happens for the rest of this game? No. They can just make the move. Murphy would hypothetically leave. For those who are just tuning in, this is a hypothetical situation of what could be happening if the Braves had the play at the deadline, which they don't. And then you bring up, let's say, Sandy Leon to back up Baldwin, which is what they did when Murphy had season-ending surgery at the end of last season. That's totally a realistic scenario if they were to hypothetically trade him and then make that kind of move. And then you go in and you have your series against the Marlins. All right, moving on to our final talking point of the episode. This move surfaced on the transaction page recently. Might as well talk about it here because it has to do with the infield again and potential options going forward. More of a depth piece, but here it is. His name is Jordan Groshans, signed January 23rd to a minor league deal. Saw action for about 17 games in 2022, has mainly been in AA and AAA. Experienced some injuries last year, but the Braves want to see how we can contribute to the system. They are an organization that is trying to beef up their minor league system a little bit, so anything helps. They list him as a shortstop, but the plurality of his professional games played, those have been at third base, but shortstop's not far behind. With the amount he's also played at first base, you can argue that he's just more of a utility guy. It's presumed he could be at spring training. It would make sense. The Yankees invited him to spring training since he was in the majors. The Marlins have. The Royals have. He was in spring training in the Cactus League just last season, and he actually looked pretty good. But he just never had a chance to really fully show what he could offer at AAA because he had been hurt for a bit. He played 8 games for the Omaha Storm Chasers. So maybe he looks good. Maybe he doesn't even make it to spring training. Sometimes that just happens. As we say, the offseason's unpredictable. He's already been assigned to AAA Gwinnett. So that's where, if the season were to start today, that's where he would be. Again, I've been being a dead horse when it comes to this talking point. Same thing with starting pitching. While we do know who the front runners are to be in the infield for the Braves, you never know when someone gets hurt, and you'll want to have some kind of option available already in the system that you're familiar with so you're not scrambling. Groshans could potentially be that guy. We won't know until it happens. Again, it is all unpredictable, but figured that news happened. If I'm willing to write about it in a story, I have to be willing to talk about it on the mic. And, well, that's all for this episode. Hit the big points, talked about a couple of newsers. Again, impromptu episode. Just wanted to discuss some of the latest rumblings that have happened since last night because, well, might as well make sure everyone's up to date so in case anything happens. I'm Harrison Smajovits, beat writer for Atlanta Braves on SI. Barring any crazy news before Tuesday, that is when we'll be back next. We do weekly episodes on Tuesdays. Usual time is still being determined, but we've done it in the evening. We've done it mid-afternoon. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Make sure to like, to share, subscribe. We appreciate your support to those who have tuned in live and those who will listen later. Thank you again, and we will see you next time.